Welcome back, fellow dissidents. I'm BC. This is SOD Live. Welcome to the State of Dissidence podcast. Stream number 2. Switching up the swag of what we're doing here. Welcome if you're new. We are going to today. We're gonna talk about, obviously you can't have a politics podcast in the United States and not talk about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. That's why it was so late. I was thinking maybe they would render a quick decision, but here we are, still no decision. And also we're going to discuss the mandate and the federal mandate, Biden's mandate, and it being stopped in the court, and also about the global COVID regime, the global tyranny. What's going on worldwide. Not just in the United States. Something we can look forward to. All right, so let's talk about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. All right, first of all, I've heard and seen people like Steven Crowder and the likes of your 2A conservatives, your gun rights advocates and such, saying that the right to defend yourself is on trial. And of course, the left says this is hyperbolic, and there's a complete bifurcation in the worldviews, and that's exactly what I want to discuss first before we even talk about the trial and the system and how fucked everything is right now. I would like to discuss the bifurcation of worldviews, because the culture war is fueling our politics. It's not always politics to culture and culture to politics. It's a revolving door, right? But nevertheless, the worldviews of the main two tribes, I guess, because there's many. Obviously, the West is full of a melding pot of different ethnicities, religions, political persuasions, and etc. But in the United States, there's obviously the two main tribes. You got your left and your right, your red and your blue, right? Well, the worldviews of those two separate people couldn't possibly be any more radically different. Now, I'm typically considered a right-winger because of my economics. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I believe in the market equilibrium. I believe in free markets, regardless if it's ideas or products or services or whatever. I believe that it's the best thing we got. I don't believe there's. Ludwig von Mises, he beat the idea of socialism. I've never seen any refutation of his book, Socialism, any coherent argument against it. He quite literally proved, with the main factor being that you have to be able to recognize market prices, or else you cannot control the economy. So humans are not capable of controlling the economy. This is very, very a flat argument. Mises is much more intellectual than I am, so he explains it better. But if you read that book, it's a literal refutation of the intricacies and can it work of socialism. And I've been convinced that it can't, and I've delved into the basic Austrian school. You got the Theory of Money and Credit by Mises, you got Man, Economy and State by Rothbard, and then there's others, but those are the seminal Austrian school authors. And but because of this, I get labeled as a right-winger. My entire life growing up, culturally, and later on in my evolution of politics, I came into anarcho-capitalism from the left. I was a liberal. I didn't know I was a liberal, but I was a liberal by default. I came up in an urban area. I listened to hip-hop music. I was in the culture. Culturally, I was fringe. I was always in a minority, never listened to mainstream music and such. But nevertheless, I had a lot that happened to me as a child, so I had lived in my victimhood for a long time, and there's nobody that can doubt that the left is literally, it festers in its victimhood. There are leftists birthed from victimhood, and if your political persuasion is to just not be political at all, you're more than likely, unless you come from a religious background or something of that effect, if you're just a regular Western civilization citizen and you don't really have any say in the matter, then you're most likely a default liberal. That's what I call it, liberal by default, because you end up going through the public school system and just the hive mind of society as a whole. It typically leans left, because we've been very progressive in the West and in America specifically. I mean, we literally birthed radical individualism, and that's the main difference between the left and the right as it sits nowadays. Because a classical liberal, the original idea of liberalism, minimal government and no intervention in the market and things of this nature, that's what a classical liberal was. But nowadays, the ideology of the Overton window has shifted so far left that even people like me or Tim Pool or whatever would be considered a right winger. But nevertheless, that is the in my eyes the main difference on the fundamental worldview of the United States specifically as pertaining to this case. So you've got the left who constantly provoke a collective narrative, thinking about each other as a collective rather than individual, as well as some sort of victimhood, intersectionality, critical race theory, and all of this comes out of victimhood, which is it ends up putting an actual victim at a deficit, because it's like the boy who cried wolf type thing. And I'm not saying this situation was anything like that. I'm speaking in generalities. If you actually have a reason to, if you have been victimized and you are in some form of traumatic victimhood, you're at a disadvantage because everybody these days is a victim of some sort, right? Except for the white straight male, the white straight heterosexual male, the cisgendered male. Let me be PC for you. Yeah, the cisgendered male is, I don't care what anybody says. Sure, you can argue about privileges and things of this nature, but at the end of the day, in today's society, the most castigated ethnicity, gender, or sexuality is the cisgendered male, the white straight man, right? But there's also radical feminism has taken a large role. And that's twofold. We needed women's suffrage, which obviously everybody agrees that women are equal to men, of course. But it's not only just the suffrage, but eventually our federal government wrecked our dollar bill. And anytime you centralize an economy, it eventually deteriorates because no human can keep up with market equilibrium. Not even any exceptional intellectual group of people cannot keep up with market equilibrium. It's not possible, right? So it ends up deteriorating the money supply. Even though we had mad prosperity in the 20th century and up till now, an incredible revolution of technology and such, but that's because of that's in spite of the market intervention, right? But because the dollar was denigrated, and as of today, more people have faith in a digital currency, like Bitcoin and such, that there's no faith in the dollar. Everybody around the world uses it as the global backing standard, because our military says you're going to take this petrodollar. You are going to buy your oil in American dollars, and you don't have a choice. And if you try, we'll topple a dictator. We'll do regime change wars for 20 plus years. It doesn't matter, right? But because of this, the economy deteriorated to such a point that it's almost necessary for your lower middle class and even just the regular middle class at this point, and it's starting to become the middle upper class as well. You need two people in a household to work to be able to raise a family, right? So that also played a part, right? And also it was normalized. I'm a libertarian. I'm a anarchist. I don't care what anybody does so long as it doesn't hurt the next person. So I obviously have nothing wrong with women in the workforce, but we weren't evolved to both work and then leave our child with somebody else, whether it be babysitters or the public school system or whatever. But I also don't down anybody for having to do this. Me and my daughter's mother both. She heavily relies on the public school system because she's got to work. Everybody's got to work, right? That's how it is now. But it was made to be normalized. It's not normal. Whether it's the woman working or the man working is completely irrelevant. It should be sustainable household for one person working. There should be a breadwinner. There's no reason with the prosperity of the West and America specifically that it shouldn't be this way. But most people don't understand the economy in our country and what exactly is happening to it. The only theory of money that actually explains what's going on is the Austrian school. Not only does it describe the business cycle with the bubbles and bursts and the market phenomena, but it also has a prescription. It tells you how to fix that, and it's not a utopia. Everybody's not automatically rich, and it's not like a social utopia or anything of that matter. It is a human-made contrivance, so it's going to have imperfections, but it's the best we have. I mean, it's undoubted that the unhampered market is the most efficient and equal means of distribution. As soon as humans start even if you have a good intention for the economy and you stick your hand in to intervene, maybe let's even say that it does exactly what you want. There's going to be some other ramification elsewhere in the economy that you have no clue about, and it will set off a chain reaction because you intervened. It's not natural. The equilibrium has to be its own, right? But nevertheless, the Austrian school not only describes this, but that's actually what led me into trying to find the hole in anarchism. Because people think that because I've been libertarian for so long that just out of nowhere on a whim, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to be an anarchist now. I don't believe in government anymore. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I still objectively, to this day, when I read new literature on any anarchist, whether left or right, I mean, I read all kinds of literature, right? And no matter what, I'm looking for the fallacy. I'm looking for the contrivance. I'm looking for the contradictions, right? I'm trying to find the whole. And I don't claim to be the most intellectual political philosopher ever. I just happen to enjoy learning about it because these ideas could make the future for our children and their children and so on prosperous beyond belief. So because of this ideology, I dig deep and I try to find what's wrong with it. And I've heard arguments, but that's not the point. What I'm saying is that that market, the market not being in perfect, non-intervention has caused, and this is a very general description, but that this is a large majority of what happened to our U.S. dollar. Not to mention, the inflation. Inflation is also part of the Austrian school. The actual inflation is when the government inflates the monetary supply. When they create more dollars out of thin air, right? This is what actual inflation is. A side effect of that is rising prices and shortages and market phenomena. But the actual inflation and also the way to equalize it is in the Austrian school. But nevertheless, that's how I got so deep into the anarcho-capitalism, was objectively believing, through my whole life, I was taught that at least some amount of government is necessary. You're just a peon. You don't understand. You could never fathom why we need a government, but we do, right? You talk to all the intellectuals throughout your upbringing. If you went to public schools, all your teachers and everything, regardless of their own persuasion and their own ideology, they thought at best they're libertarian and they think we need to roll back the government. I'm yet to hear of an anarchist ideology in a public school yet, because if they honestly believed in abolishing the government, then they believed that the job that they were doing was inherently not under the right auspice of control. The public school system is created, funded, and backed by taxpayers, and the government takes control, right? This is why it's so terrible. But it leads everybody who goes through them to believe that you need some amount of government, right? So you've got the market not being in equilibrium because of intervention, plus the inflation, and the government becomes more tyrannical as it grows. You lose freedoms. You force people to work, and there's this bifurcation of worldviews. And I don't claim to be intellectual enough to know when it started, but there's always people on the spectrum of authoritarian and to libertarian. Everybody falls on that spectrum, and there's always going to be people that choose quote unquote safety over liberty, right? But I truly believe that through the public school system and the indoctrination that occurs there, and then a good portion of people go on to borrow money from the government to subsidize their higher learning, and then they get further indoctrinated, and that's where the real insidious stuff comes from. is in intelligentsia, because there's no room for dissent. You have to conform. I mean, there's people that go through colleges, there's some right-wing-ish colleges, but it's a majority of one ideology, and that was not supposed to be the point of higher learning. Excuse me. Higher learning was supposed to be people challenging the way you think. Many different worldviews, many different ideologies, many different thoughts of technology and spirituality and history. Many different things to make you come to your own conclusion. Not what to think, but how to think. And at some point, high intelligentsia was taken over by it's like Dr. Gad Saad's book, The Parasitic Mind. It's literally an idea pathogen. This is a thing. And this idea of utopia, that somehow humans can live in a completely equal state, absolutely egalitarian, where everything's equal and nobody wants for nothing, right? But that is literal utopianism, right? But this has been the idea for well over past my lifetime, and since basically the progressive era. Another book by Rothbard if you want to learn about the period. But nevertheless, this is all of this culminated into the culture that we have right now. And you've got your two tribes. You've got your people who stay inside of their victimhood, and they are thoroughly on the authoritarian side of the spectrum, right? Whether they say they are or they're not, because you have some supposed anarcho-communists on the left who ally with Antifa, and not only do they, they're in a constant state of revolution, just like the Marxists and the Stalins and the Lenins all said that it needed to be perpetual revolution. Right? Not only is that commonly violent and toxic, but then on top of it, you've got them constantly breeding in a victimhood, because it's about the collective, and the collective could never be perfect because it's human. So you're in a constant state of revolution. This is why you see all this convoluted Marxian theory, whether it's critical race theory, which is inherently Marxist. It's instead of being the bourgeoisie and the proletarian, you have all these different intersectionalities, and now there's a credit score of your intersectionality. Best being, I'm not even going to go there, but you get the drift. You've got all of this culminating into this bifurcation, and it's. I said today, I was I was just talking to my friends on Facebook on a live video, and I said that we are literally coming to a revolution, and it's not hyperbole. It's not hyperbole. There's a lot of people who, even if I believe that what they're aiming at, or what they think, their red pills and their white pills, why they think they're right in their worldview, even if I disagree with that, they still live in basic reality. Right? Even if you're like say a minarchist, a libertarian who believes in some government, right? Let's say I don't think that your political worldview is coherent, but nevertheless it is what it is. They still live in some form of reality, right? But then you have the left, who has been put through perpetual indoctrination, perpetual fear, perpetual victimhood and entitlement. Like, I am supposed to be, because of their, if you think in their ideology, I am the epitome of privilege, and I should just want for nothing because I was born a white male, a white straight male, right? Anybody who knows me personally can tell you that I'm the farthest thing from privileged. Everything that I have, I had to work very, very hard for. Right? But then that's the difference. That doesn't matter. And that's where the Marxian theory comes in. Because the Marxists thought of class thought. So if you were in the bourgeoisie, you were in the upper classes, right? You could never understand the proletarian mindset because you were part of the bourgeoisie, right? And the same for the proletariat. We could never, the workers, the constant state of revolution is because we could never understand the bourgeoisie. And that's what the revolution was there to do, was to get rid of the bourgeoisie. And that people say that doesn't always lead to a mass genocide, but that's exactly what it means. Because you cannot convert everybody. Not everybody believes in communism. Not everybody believes that we can cut some off at the top and put some under the bottom and it'll work. There's no utopia for us, right? But this is the same thing that happens in the CRT. And they'll say, oh, we're not teaching that to kids in school. Sure, that the actual critical race theory put out by Ibram Kendi and his predecessors and such. I forget all their names. I did a deep dive on it, but I'm just blanking on the particulars. But nevertheless, it's still with intersectionality with race and sex and gender and all this stuff, right? Instead of just a class struggle between bourgeoisie and proletarian, now you've got all these different divisions and basically a social credit score based on your intersectionality, right? And then they, because of their thought of utopianism, if you would just do as I say, then I could usher in the utopia, right? This is the fallacy of almost all ideologies, is we think that we could bring about the revolution that leads to utopia, right? But that's what drew me towards libertarianism. There's never an offer in anarchism or libertarianism. There's never an offer of utopia. We understand that there's a human condition. We understand that, humans will be humans, and no matter what happens, that it will be imperfect. Now, it could always be better, and we know this inside radical individualism. I was making this connection last time, or what in a private video, but nevertheless, the left constantly thinks in terms of the collective, and most people, even if you're not engaged in that kind of manner, most people think in terms of the collective, the hive mind. What can I sacrifice for the collective, right? But that is, that's where the egalitarianism came from. This equity, not equality, but equity, right? Redistribution. But that is the main inherent, fundamental, cornerstone difference. And people are all over the place on this spectrum, this radical spectrum of collectivism to individualism. And that's what was so radical about the founding of this country. And that's why a lot of people love this country, because it gave them the keys to do their best for everybody, inherently for yourself, radical individualism. The government does not grant you anything. At best, an ideology can teach you that a government can protect your rights, but your rights are inherent. They are yours when you come into this world from your mother's womb, right? They are endowed in your body already. Every right that you have, the infinite amount of rights that you have as an individual, they are inherent. And that's why it was so radical, and it was so prosperous, and it grew so quickly. That's how you got the Industrial Revolution and the technological revolution happening as we speak. It's because of radical individualism. If every person, as an individual, strives to do their best to supply the free market and the market of ideas and intellectualism and art and all this stuff, we have completely unmolested market space, right? Everybody will strive. Not everybody, obviously. You're going to have humans that, try to get the free ride, or they rob, or they steal, or they kill. That will still be a thing, right? But without going into too much application, if every person strives to do their best, the entire collective rises and prospers as a whole, right? But the left doesn't believe that. They believe that hierarchy is a bad thing. They don't believe in top-down structure. And people are like, well, isn't that a contradiction in anarchism? Because there has to be some sort of hierarchy. And it's that anarchism doesn't mean no rules, it means no rulers. It just means it would have to be voluntary. Everything is voluntary, right? But nevertheless, I've gone off on a tangent. There is the inherent the difference between the hypothetical tribes of right and left, right? But it's been so bifurcated by the culture and the culture war. And it all stems from a few things. It stems from the public school system and making everybody default de facto liberals. I mean, some people choose to be engaged in politics and they choose Republican or Democrat or Libertarian, but it's a small percentage of people who actually engage, right? Everybody else is just kind of going with the flow, right? But that difference of from there to the upper intelligentsia is all the difference. because it's incentivized to just follow the collective. And then you've got this radical technology of algorithms that feed you full of whatever will keep you staring at the screen. Both all of them, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they all know inside of their algorithm what you are most likely to do, what they need to do to keep you on it. That's how they generate ad revenue. And that part is fine to me, but the part that is wrong is the fact that they know more about you than you do. Most people don't even understand how radically advanced this technology is. They think they're just connecting with their friends. I mean, it's kind of hard to even fathom that in today's day and age, people don't know how bad just constantly scrolling through Facebook or Instagram is. But nevertheless, we are in that age, right? And then, you mold all that together, right? And then you've got this ideology at the top of intersectionality, right? And it's forced top down. And everybody's basically a default liberal. And you have to find your way to the truth, right? And then we've got the inherent right to defend ourselves, right? Which brings us to what's actually at stake here. The left does not have any contrivances about the Constitution or your inherent rights. They don't care. They will tell you outright. Now, some the left used to try to sneak socialism and the Marxism in the back door. They used to make exemptions and stretch the Constitution until it's about to break, to make a reason why their unconstitutional policies are constitutional, right? But that's not even a fallacy no more. They've got most of the country convinced that this is the way forward. We need to think in terms of the collective. And that's why this last year and a half specifically with the COVID regime and everything going on with that, why it's been so insidious. There's a lot of people at the top right now that have a lot of great information on how many people will just outright say, okay, government said I can't have a business, so no more business. I'm going to go ahead and lock down. And here they said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Like, this is the most upsetting part of the entire thing. When it comes to the pandemic, they said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And because we think in terms of the collective, most people do, we thought, yeah, we can sacrifice 2 weeks, no problem. And then the government noticed how fast everybody capitulated. And everybody excuses it those first 2 weeks because it was like, it was novel. We didn't know what was going on, had no information, right? But because everybody, a vast majority of folks think in terms of the collective, it worked. And it worked worldwide. And that is, I think, when people look back at this time, this will be the time where they're like, yes, this is where the real turmoil started. The wick on the bomb got real close at this point. Things are coming unraveled quick. And when conservatives and libertarians and people, gun rights activists speak about our right to defend ourselves is on trial, it's not hyperbolic. It's not hyperbolic because that if you believe in the Constitution, then that document tells you quite literally the government has no say in it. That's why they worded it the way they did. Necessary for a militia, the people, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If they thought that was just supposed to be the government to protect us, they would have left it at the militia, or they would have stated it as such. They would have not used the words militia and people, because the militia and people is literally the citizenry. They're saying it comes from God. It's inherent. It's in us. If we are at fight for our life, we are at liberty to defend it. This is not something the government has anything to do with. If anything, they should keep people from encroaching on that right. But where are we at? Sure, there's been some decent headway in the last couple of years. Multiple states have been getting constitutional carry and such. But don't get me wrong, I'll take it. That's a great win. But you got to think like in the justice system, there's it's supposed to be objectively, right, that you're paying a debt to society, right? This magnanimous arbitrary entity that nobody can put their hands on, but it's civilization, it's society. And when you do something wrong, you have to pay your retribution to society. Now, society actually ends up being the government, right? All retribution goes through the state and federal governments, right? But like, take my situation. When I was 18, I had a destruction of property case, right? And I paid my debt to society, right? But because they deemed it to be so much money, they got an arbitrary number and it was over so much, they considered it a felony. And since that day, when I was, that fateful day when I was 19, I have been lacking my right to legally keep and bear arms. Right? So they can arbitrarily say that, and I fully admit I didn't plead not guilty or anything. I was being reckless, and as young men do, right? But I'm not negating the fact I committed a crime and I paid my debt. I paid restitution and the whole nine. But because they marked me with a felony and I live in a liberal state like Michigan, that means never. And I could get a lawyer and go back and try to get it expunged, and that's in the works, right? But you got to wait so long, and there's a whole bunch of hoops, and I've taken a long time to get all my other legal and financial issues in order, right? So I will eventually get to, but think of all that time that if I wanted to defend myself, I had to do so at risk of being locked up for years. There's nothing constitutional about this. I'm no detriment to society, but they took away my right to bear arms. Still to this day. But you've got a law-abiding citizen, a stellar young man. I don't agree with his politics, right? He's a thin blue line kid. He's a full-blown Republican. He's that's what they had against him. He's openly right-winger. He says he's a Trump supporter, so he has to be a white supremacist. Trust and believe, I take issue with a lot of things that Trump did. Yes, I do. But if that young man is supporting one side or the other, that is his right to do so. And the very first argument that came from the left towards the right about this was that he was a white supremacist right off top. At the beginning, the narrative was that he was killing black folks. It was a 17-year-old white kid killing other white people. And it dismays me to see the culture that's around it. Because so long as there's a narrative that the corporate press espouses, there's just a large faction of people who say, that must be it. No amount of critical thinking whatsoever. I've seen Twitter leftists, as of recently, after a year denigrating this kid and openly, publicly riling the whole situation up and trying to provoke him and calling him a racist and all this stuff, that are like, oh yeah, now that it's been televised in court, I apologize. That was pretty terrible. So it's not hyperbolic, it's not facetious to say that our right, there is a precedent set every single time a court case is established. It goes into case law. Should you be in a situation where you're back, it's all on, I don't, I'm a commentator. I'm not trying to be a news guy. I make sure what I'm saying about the news is factually correct, but I'm not here to, I'm here to provoke ideas. I'm here to talk shit, basically. Right? Spread ideas and talk about what's going on, right? So I'm not going to bring up, the video and go through an elaborate commentator elaboration. We've all seen it. Anybody who's watching this knows the title and has, picked so duly. But anybody who's watched the sequence of events in detail knows that kid's back was against the wall. And it was never, every single time that he pulled the trigger, he was forced to do so. Had he not, he would have been the one harmed. So it is our right to defend ourselves that's on trial. It surely is, because it sets a precedence, like I said. Should this young man be in a situation, and he crossed state lines with a gun. Wrong. People are still saying that to this day. Wrong. It was in there, and I'm an anarchist, so I don't even believe in sure, there can be geographical locations separated by arbitrary lines. That's fine, but that should make no difference to your right to defend yourself. Underneath the geographical United States of America, you should be able to carry a pistol from one end to the other and back, or a long rifle, or whatever, so long as you're not provoking folks. That was the description and intent of the constitutional language when it was drafted. But we've got an authoritarian spectrum who knew how to use our own humanity against us. Well, just think in terms of the collective. What about your fellow man? Don't we want to stop people killing each other? Well, we gotta clamp back on guns then. And it's the exact opposite that'll fix it. Anybody who's in a terrible spot geographically in terms of violence and crime, the best thing they can do is have their arms. And I love to see the hypocrisy. You've got the right wingers, the conservatives, the supposed diehard 2A activists, right? That are saying, they say that lines are imaginary, but he crossed the state line with a gun, and then they turn around and get mad at the other guy who had a gun. If you were so 2A absolute, you would argue his right to have his gun as well. Now, not point it at young Rittenhouse, not provoke him with it to where he had to take action. But they're like, oh, well, he didn't have the proper paperwork with the government, right? He wasn't legally carrying a gun. So therefore, that by default, doesn't matter. No, if you were a 2A absolutist, that man would have his gun as well. Do I think that his character is absolutely just atrocious? Absolutely. The man did things to kids that, I'll leave it at that. I'm a father, right? So hearing what this man did to 5 different kids, it undoubtedly upsets me. No doubt. Admittedly, it does. But that does not give anybody the right to just outright vigilante kill him, right? But that also doesn't give him the right to run around and provoke people. But you see the double standard. We all need to, especially in incredibly polarized situations like this, like it's about to burst. I'm watching everybody on Twitter and social medias and YouTube and on news and podcasts just bursting at the seams with kinetic energy. People are outside the courthouse right now, leftists saying, left and right. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure if it goes, Rittenhouse gets convicted, there's going to be problems, but it won't be as bad. That's my prediction. This is conjecture, right? But if he does walk on all charges, which he should, in my opinion, not a legal analyst, but this is my opinion. I'm a guy on the internet talking shit, but he should walk. And should he walk, there's a lot of tension all over the world and especially in this country right now. Nothing cannot be made into a political tribal team sport. This kid's life is in the balance. People made fun of him directly and it's just terrible. This kid, think about it. Think about when you were 17 years old. Now think about being backed into a corner and having to kill your way out. And then the government you live under tests whether or not you had the right to do that. I'm a grown man. I'm 33 years old, and I can tell you right now, I would not be feeling super frugal on the stand. I would not be in a comfort position. And this kid's 17. He hasn't even lived life yet, and he's liable to lose his entire life right now. And then the argument comes almost inevitably, oh, but he chose to go there. Yes, he did. He happens to be of a right-wing persuasion and believes in private property and the right to protect that property. We also have to remember the polarization of why there was even riots in the first place. Most people are starting from the shooting and the altercation of Rittenhouse and the people who died and got injured. But it started days before that. The thing about Jacob Blake, which was propagandized, and there was a narrative through the corporate press that polarized people, and it spread like wildfire through social medias. People espousing things that they had no idea about but had seen headlines. That's all it takes these days, headlines. And you've got a cultural civil war ready to boil over. But almost nobody is talking about the polarization leading up to this. This is why our 2A rights are on trial. Because he was there. He's supposed to be this atrocious white supremacist. And then everybody comes to find out that he's nothing like that. He's a young Republican kid who was out there most of the time putting out fires and trying to stop people from blowing up gas stations and such. I've seen enough of the evidence and the video and the magically produced from the FBI video to understand that if I was in the jury's place, I could objectively say that kid is he should have redress to the government for even putting him on trial. It's absurd, but it's all politics, right? The whole case of Jacob Blake before was washed away in a flurry because now they got their new bad guy. Since Trump has been out of office, they've been waiting for another villain. They can't pin it on anybody. That's why they still label Trump. That's why anybody who even associates with Trump is just the devil to these people. You're automatically by default they're on a higher moral standing because they're against Trump. People honestly believe that. And this is the environment that this kid was just trying to protect some property. I commend him. And I'm an anarchist. Just because our worldviews are different does not mean I should not be advocating for his rights. Because if they can take it from their rights, they can take it from my rights. This is what people don't understand. On both sides, there's this hypocrisy of, oh, well, you broke that government law, so haha, and then vice versa. Now, given, I admittedly, I understand that right-wingers are more prevalent when it comes to dealing with logic and reality. This is a fact. I mean, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, this is an inherent character trait, right? But that's a whole nother conversation. But nevertheless, it is a fact. We are inherently different. We are inherently different, and we are increasingly seeing, the furthering of the. Most people are calling it radicalization, and to a point, I would agree with that. But it's not always just radicalization. It's mostly polarization. It's just contrarian. It's like putting them the wrong sides of the magnet to each other, and they just keep pushing apart, further and further apart. This is the polarization that we have in this country, right? So, I think my prediction, which is it's hard to do in this, because I talked about the Chauvin trial. Right, I made a video about it, and I got some backlash from libertarians for that video because I tried to explain the nuance that I wasn't defending the cop, but that the system was so corrupt that they weren't allowing the evidence to be admitted, right? And he ended up getting locked up, and the federal court said if he was let go that they were going to press civil rights charges on him anyways. So, it's you have to distinguish my worldview and what I agree with and what I would advocate for, and then also when I make some arbitrary prediction as to the system as it sits. People like to conflate the two, like, oh, well, you think like this, but then you say something contradictory when it comes to the actual situation. Well, that's because you can't live in Ancapistan. That's one of the biggest arguments against anarcho-capitalists. We are so confident in our worldview and that it's coherent in logic that we live like everybody should think like us. Everybody should think about how utopian and how perfect it would be. And I'm at fault for that sometimes as well, because it is a coherent ideology. I'm yet to hear a more convincing argument than absolute freedom, but I digress. Nevertheless, we live in the United States in 2021, and this kid he's and the left has already made accusations. This is how culture infects our politics. This kid's only being charged because of politics, right? And the left has now come out and said, because they heard Proud to be an American ringing on the judge's phone, that because he's patriotic, he's automatically biased, because they link the patriotism to this country to the judge and Rittenhouse, which is absurd. It's just absurd. There's been a lot of things that this judge hasn't given to the defense, and he's not taken no crap off of the prosecutor either. I think he's been to a detriment. He's been very equal to each side. But nevertheless, I digress. They say because he's patriotic and because he dropped the weapons charge that he's automatically biased. So, my prediction is that he goes back to the jury, right? The jury is back deliberating as we speak. And, matter of fact, before I even say something, let me go ahead and check Twitter, make sure that I'm not talking out of turn here. Let's see here. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay, so they're still deliberating. All right, so what I believe is that both left and right have already made up their minds, right? We all have our biases, and we have taken those biases all the way through this trial, giving no headway to any kind of push and pull. So it's been completely polarized to begin with. But I think if the jury comes back, I honestly think that they're going to convict him of something lesser, because there's so much polarization and threats towards the jurors themselves that these the entire country is on high alert right now, waiting for this verdict to come back, because should he walk outright, it's going to be mass upheaval from the left, and we all know this. Now, if he's if he's convicted, the right's not going to go crazy and riot. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect, but this is the case. But, I hope that justice is played out. There's no such thing as objective law. That's why you have two lawyers on two separate sides of a case, because the law is not objective. We are humans. We're not perfect. There cannot be a utopian objective law. But I digress. That's my thoughts on it. There's just an crazy, insane amount of polarization that has fueled many conflicts, but this one particularly. And one side is looking at it logically, and the other side is looking at it emotionally. And sometimes that wins out in court. Sometimes emotions they affect the jury. All right, but there's also there's the topic of the mandate. I was talking to somebody earlier, and they were excited that it got stopped. And, I'm excited that the mandate is not, that some court system picked it up and stopped it. But there's so many people that just blindly adhere to the government that it's not going to matter. The OSHA regulation, it might be hard for them to implement and enforce, but there's going to be a lot of people that just capitulate. So it's stopped for now. I mean, none of this has been constitutional. Ever since the progressive era, it hasn't been constitutional. They have stretched and searched and prodded for, constitutional reasoning for everything that they do. That's how the government grew to be this big. The people who drafted the Constitution didn't think it was going to last but 30 years. And here we are 2 centuries later. So, but it's, and there's also a lot of people who are getting tired. There's a lot of people who are, but, there's the white pill about all this too, because, as soon as the news was relayed to the public that Pfizer had okayed the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, I seen a lot of interesting conversation, a lot of interesting dialogue among parents who I don't normally see talking about these kinds of things, right? But there's a lot of people that, even if they don't engage in politics, they are paying attention now. They see what's happening, because it's been brought to a point where there is no wiggle room. They are choosing centralized control over our health, or full autonomy to do as you please with your health. This is where we're at. This is there's no middle. There's no way to connive or trade off. There's no trade off. It's literally one or the other. And then, at a global level, you got Australia, which the entire time has been a full-blown authoritarian police state. And then Austria just locked down the unvaccinated folks. The goalposts have continued to shift the entire time, and it won't ever stop. The people who have gathered information about how many people will just capitulate and will they think they're going to get back to some normal. Normal's gone. People don't understand. I don't know how many people do understand and how many people don't. I've seen some rather large amounts of resentment around people being pessimistic, right? And to a certain degree, I agree. We should be optimistic. They wouldn't need all of this propaganda if they were quote unquote winning, right? The establishment, the corporate press, the big tech oligarchs, all of these people who have their dog in the fight, because there's no argument. The numbers are quite clear. The largest transfer of wealth in human history happened during this pandemic. It was just a literal obliteration of the middle class and self-sustainable small businesses. And so many people worldwide are starting to think in terms of the collective. And there's already, this is how authoritarian governments have done this the entire time. The entire history of the state. That's how they got folks to capitulate. Is first they propagandized them with fear, and then they offered them the utopia, the solution. But that's the thing. The solution never comes. You end up having to go through so much strife and violence and war. But it's to see the people are already othering everybody else. The right does it to the left does it to the right. I'm guilty of it sometimes. It's like things are incredibly polarized. And even the corporate press has been entertaining the ideas of secession. I mean, Tom Woods, if you follow Tom Woods at all, he's wrote a whole book on nullification and the 10th Amendment and such. And there should be multiple constitutional ways for us to decentralize the government. It's in the document. It's in the document. And all of these arbitrary powers that are being exhibited by our federal government is underneath unconstitutional emergency powers. They don't have the right to do this. They never did. They never did. There's no piece of paper that gives us our rights. And we're the last of the Mohicans. There's not a place on earth where radical individualism has as strong a chance to survive. But I also understand how demoralizing this all is for most folks. I think it was Mencken said that most people don't want safety, or most people don't want freedom. They want safety, right? And this is the truth. And especially like I said, I mean, I can see both sides of being pessimistic about the global tyranny. I can see that. But if you are truly and honestly red-pilled, and you believe that you understand the big picture. I mean, obviously, nobody knows this, the entire picture, but in generalities, if you honestly believe that your worldview is coherent and you see the players for who they are and the plays that they're making for what they are, then you should be optimistic because, they're terrified. They see that, people are waking up. Why would you, even if you still buy into some of it, right? Let's play devil's advocate. Even if you buy into some of it, there's still that nagging question. Why am I being lied to? Why are the goalposts moving? No, I trust you, Daddy Government. I trust you, but why? That's because that's the way the incentive structure for politics and government is set up for. It's corrupted. There's a lot of people who got a lot of decent information about what is to come. You know, and it's a good thing when people start to open their eyes, because they're more likely to be braced and prepared for whatever it is that comes. But you know, I'll leave it at that. By all means, please like, share, subscribe. You know, it's incredibly difficult to try and get traction on this podcast. So if you could just hit the like button, if you could you know, subscribe, share it wherever you can. Trying to think if I missed anything. All right, y'all. I'll end with that. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.